I went golfing, and I hit really good balls, and I drank coffee and did a beer. Then Kenny fixed my bike, and I ride it with Noah.
Part of Atlanta off Cascade Road, a road that I have no real tangible memory of ever being on, although I think long ago, perhaps 2 or so years, I may have come down this way with Angel when he first showed me the Beltline. But in truth, there's no recollection of this spot, and I've certainly never been here at night, which has been, so far, a very cool way to experience a new part of town. Today is Tuesday, April 17th, I believe, and it's been quite a while since I've been able to record anything. I lost my recorder at the Odd Future show, Tyler the Creator and all, at the Tabernacle. I had brought my recorder with me to maybe, I don't even know what, if there was a potential to get any good footage of anything, I thought it was worth bringing the recorder, and so I did. And during all the jumping and smashing and everything that everyone was doing, it got thrown out of my pocket, out of my little satchel that I had brought with me, and likely stomped to oblivion. Noah went to the show as well, and he lost his glasses, which were a fair shade more expensive, I think, than my recorder. So we all sacrificed that night to go to that show. And it's a little windy tonight. It's been kind of an overcast day. I haven't tested this recorder's ability to cut through the wind, although it does have a noise filter function, which is on right now. So hopefully nothing will be distorted or, gravelly like the old recorder was. But recently, I bought a new recorder at Best Buy. I've met this guy there a couple times named Damien. And recently, when I went to actually purchase this recorder after having stopped by before when I first met him, just to kind of browse and everything, I was talking to him about Deepak Chopra, who recently came to Georgia State, which actually is the last, episodes of Malt that I put out were featuring his talk. And it was interesting trying to explain to him what Deepak Chopra was about, because I sensed a lot of resistance and a lot of fundamental misunderstanding about, Eastern philosophy in general, which I think Deepak really pulls a lot of his messages from that sort of a tradition as opposed to Western thought. And then sort of he kept asking me what Deepak believed in terms of religion and what he would call himself theistically. And that kind of a question wasn't a bad question, but he asked it and reframed it several times in different permutations of the same general question, asking what he would say he actually believed. Would Deepak Chopra say that he believes in God? What religion does he follow? And just these questions that were largely irrelevant to, I think, what the main point of what Deepak was trying to communicate was, which his lecture was entitled, Healing Through Higher Consciousness, or something like that. It was a little bit more complicated title, but it had to do with how raising your consciousness to the interconnectedness of everything around you can in turn promote healing in the mind, body, and soul. And this Damien guy, I just don't think fundamentally understood what I was telling him. And it was interesting, and I wrote about it a little bit in my bike log, which I started keeping somewhat religiously, and biking in order to really fill up the daily entries that I make. Biking, larger and larger amounts, trying to go as far as I can each day with the time that I have after work or whatever else. Today has been kind of a slow day biking because it's been so rainy, and there's definitely not much motivation to get out into a rainy day. By no means would I ever give in to what I would perceive as laziness, but today I decided to stay in while the rain passed. So that was a choice that I made that I feel like was good. And now here I am. I've done about 17 miles, been exploring this new part of Atlanta, and I'll talk about my bike ride in a minute that I'm on right now, because it's an overall theme that I'd like to discuss that is currently one of the most important and one of the most devoted things that I'm spending time doing. But first I'd like to, talk about a few of the main things that have happened since I've had this absence in making molt, which a lot has happened, so it's going to be really hard to recollect too much, I guess. But there are three things I want to talk about that have just come to mind. One is my grandmother, who is currently sort of in the last days of her life, and actually, I'll just talk about these in order, because why not? I just want to remember that there's three of them so that I can come back. It's going to be Grandma, then biking with my shoulder, and then Josh in the mountains. So, my grandmother recently, she's been a lot different than I've ever seen her be before in the past. And one of the things I've always really liked about her, this is my father's mother, we call her Mame. One of the things I've always liked about Mame has been her vigor and her vivacious just spirit and energy. She's always been old while I've been alive. She's always been definitely a grandmother-looking kind of woman. However, despite this, she's always had this really vibrant energy that I've been able to really feel and appreciate since being a child. And my grandmother, she'd always go to Hawaii. She would go yearly. And she had friends in Hawaii, and she was good friends with a singer, I guess a guy named Don Ho, who, I don't know if he's a major celebrity or anything, but I know that he is famous enough to, be recognized probably by people of a certain generation. And his daughter is Hoku, who I guess enjoyed very brief fame thanks to the Disney Channel and stuff like that. My sister used to have an autographed copy of her CD that my grandma had gotten from her while, I guess, in Hawaii one time. And so anyway, this was sort of the foundational image I had of my grandmother, because I've always lived away from the vast majority of my relatives. They've just never really been close, never been huge parts of my life, which has been made all the more apparent to me, just how much distance I've had with my relatives, given the relationship that Brittany had with her relatives. They were all so close and, intimately aware of the events that happened in each other's lives, and it was just something I could not relate to and have an even more objective view of now that Brittany and I have broken up. Just, how I feel about that, whether or not I like that kind of family situation. And I was reflecting on that the other day. This is a brief digression, which reminds me I need to talk about a fourth thing, getting those tickets. I was thinking the other day that I was happy that I have always been kind of separated from my family, because I think if I was connected more so with my family, there would be more of a tribal element and more of a concern within me to be a certain kind of person, because, family, while they do unconditionally unconditionally love you to a degree, they also expect a lot from you, and they expect certain things of you. And, there are family traditions and family standards that are sort of impressed upon you. And that's something that I realized a lot in Brittany's family, because one of the biggest things about her family is family itself, and, having children, getting married, relationships. And to me, that's just never really been a very big part of my life, never been a big consideration. The majority of my young adult life I have spent by myself doing things like what I'm doing right now. And it's given me a strong sense of self and a very strong will and an ability to entertain myself almost inexhaustibly. And I think that if I were part of a more tight-knit family overall, largely speaking, that this would be severely diminished, and I would be a lot more dependent upon other people, because other people have just been in my life the entire time. But as it stands now, I stand very strongly and very independently. So, I wrote a haiku once, or maybe it wasn't even a haiku, it was just a one-line kind of poem, but it was something like, he had the type of solitude that would make any self-respecting obelisk blush. And so that to me just signified, this big structure of an obelisk that's like very profound and tall and huge. And then you I guess, give that personification and imagine a human standing with such, wide stature and such awesome breadth and everything. And I don't know, to a large degree, that's what I strive for. I strive to have that kind of personage. And anyway, that digression aside, back to my grandmother. So in the past few years, particularly since my grandfather, my father's father, we called him Papa, since he passed away, I've noticed in my grandmother that there was a severe subtraction of a large part of this vigor that I'd always associated with her. I've always heard of stories of, people who have been married for years. One of the spouses dies, and shortly thereafter, the other one passes away as well, as if there was some sort of a lifeline, like a true, tangible lifeline shared between the two of them that was severed when the one passed. And I definitely noticed that to a degree with my grandmother, although it's been years now, so there's not to say that, that situation where she passes away shortly thereafter my grandfather had is the same thing. But slowly she has started to kind of weather away. And most recently I saw my family, my mom, my dad, my uncle, his partner, my aunt, and my grandmother at my uncle's loft in Atlanta. And my grandmother was falling asleep in the chair while we were all talking, having sort of like a little, family time thing before they all went out to eat. And I had never seen her like this before. And it was hard to really focus on the moment, because to me it was such a strange sight to see and to behold, because she had always, she goes to bed extremely late. It's usually around 1 a.m. She wakes up, 6 or 7 a.m. And so she'd never been one to be so overly exhausted during the day to where she actually, dozes off in her chair. And so to me that was the first indication that some big paradigm was shifting ever more, ever still. And so recently my grandmother was hospitalized after she was experiencing some severe weakness and shortness of breath and things like that. She's had some heart problems in the past. And my uncle, my dad's brother, Len, he is an emergency room technician. And so he knew that this was a bad sign, and so she was taken to the hospital, and they ran several tests and everything, and they actually determined that she had a few forms of cancer in her body. And they were talking about flying her to Tampa or some big Floridian state and having some major surgery performed on her. And I remember I was sitting outside on my break when all of this was really going on. She was at the hospital, and my father had gone down to Florida, and my mom was there as well. And it was a big family kind of event. Everyone was kind of showing up, and they were all gathered around her. And I knew the situation, and I knew that they were thinking about sending her down to Tampa so that she could get this surgery. because she had said after talking with the doctors that she wanted to do whatever the doctor thought was right. And I was just mulling over that, and I called my dad and ended up speaking with my Uncle Stephen, his other brother, and talking to Stephen about how I really felt like Mame should not go through with the surgery. And, I couldn't imagine a worse situation as if she were to pass away during this major surgery, which would involve, a lot of recovery, a lot of rehabilitation, and all of this expected from like an 85-year-old woman, The doctor said that her heart was healthy enough to handle the kind of trauma and stress that operation would entail. But I just really couldn't take that seriously, because, you have someone in this stage of life, I think psychologically speaking, it's called old age, 65 and above. And, what's the point of going through a major surgery? It's not going to be the same situation as if you were 40 years younger. You can't really expect your body at this latent stage of life to be able to repair itself as if it were young and youthful. Because, a lot of these cancers and everything are likely caused by the mere fact alone that she is as old as she is, and all of the genetic defects that have accumulated in her body from birth till this point have just sort of, amounted to such a degree to where it's actually caused her to have expressions of cancer throughout her body. This is sort of what Aubrey de Grayling, a TED speaker who has talked a lot about human aging and reversing the process of aging. He's spoken about how you will either die of old age, which is basically just your organs themselves shutting themselves down, or you will die of cancer. And cancer occurs inevitably at the end of your life because every time one of your cells has a DNA, let's call it a malfunction, a misprinting of the DNA strand, that it carries an imperfection, a mistake. Over time, these mistakes can collect and can become, cancerous, carcinogenic, something like that. And so I told my uncle that I really felt like sending her to the hospital to have this surgery and her having the potential of passing away during it was not the right idea, and that she should really be with family and really, if she's content to do whatever anyone thinks is the right idea, that she should really just live her days out, as comfortably as she can with us. And I guess they gave that some consideration, what I had said, and that's the decision that they came to. They decided that she would not go through with the surgery, and she said that she was at peace with that fact and that she was at peace with the idea that she would be passing away, which is interesting because I talked to my aunt, who has been spending a lot of time with Mame recently, and she was saying how interesting it is to see someone of my grandmother's generation facing death and just realizing the cultural differences that exist within her mind and her perception of reality with things like death and these different social taboos that are always present throughout human history, though our, culturally trained reactions to them are what vary. And so it was just giving my aunt a lot of introspection into what it is like to die in general, but then also what it's like for someone to die who was born in, 1910, 1920, whatever early 1900 year it would have been that my grandma was born in. And so I have requested off next weekend to go down to Florida with my Uncle Stephen and be with my grandma for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I think that's really good. Since this whole situation has happened, I keep thinking about this Ben Folds line in one of their songs where he's talking about never even once went to visit my grandmother when she was sick before she died. I think it might be in that song Regrets, which would make sense. And I just don't want to have that same situation. Don't want to think back to the time when my grandmother was sick and slowly passing away, and know that I could have seen her, but I decided not to make the effort to get down to Tallahassee, not ask off for work because I, didn't want to interrupt whatever, my schedule, my flow. That's very selfish, and so I'm glad that I've done what I can, for the moment at least, to ensure that I can get down there to see her. And so that's one topic. I have 3 more to go, and then I will recommence my ride.
I was raised up believing I was somehow unique, like a snowflake, distinct among snowflakes, unique in each way you'd conceive. And now after some thinking, I'd say I'd rather be a functioning cog in some great machinery, serving something beyond me. But I don't know what that will be. I'll get back to you someday soon. You will see. What's my name? What's my station? Oh, just tell me what I should do. I don't need to be kind to the armies of night that would do such injustice to you, or bow down and be grateful and say, sure, take all that you see. To the men who move only in dimly lit halls and determine my future for me. And I don't know who to believe. I'll get back to you someday soon. You will see. If I know only one thing, it's that everything that I see of the world outside is so inconceivable. Often I barely can speak. Yeah, I'm tongue-tied and dizzy, and I can't keep it to myself. What good is it to sing helplessness blues? Why should I wait for anyone else? And I know you will keep me on the shelf. I'll come back to you someday soon, myself. If I had an orchard, I'd work till I'm raw. If I had an orchard, I'd work till I'm sore. And you would wait tables and soon run the store. Gold hair in the sunlight, my light in the dawn.
I'm going to go on ahead and talk about bringing the bike home on my shoulder. I talked to my friend Josh recently, and he and I had come to the decision that it would be best for me to give him my fixed gear, my old bike that I used to ride in Atlanta before I was enlightened to the far superior world of geared biking. And so I had made arrangements with my sister, Lauren, to have the bike brought back to Atlanta when she and I both were going to be in Lilburn, where my parents live and where the bike was located. But the day that I was going to leave to come back to Atlanta after being in Lilburn for one night, Josh kind of jokingly suggested that I should just bring it back on my shoulder, because I've, taken bikes around the city before like that, never more than probably 5 or 6 miles, just transporting it from one house to Sopo and back or whatever. But as Josh started to talk about it, I got really hooked on the idea and the endurance test that it presented and everything, and I was really intrigued and curious if I could do it, because I had no doubt that I could do it, but I wanted to see that I actually could. And so Josh and I were talking, and I was telling him that I wanted to become the man, and that it seemed like doing this task would help me become the man. I was like, Josh, would this make me the man? And Josh told me that it would be one part to becoming the man. It would be a Hall of Fame. It would be what was called a Hall of Fame kind of feat. And if I completed it, it would be one of 4 required to become the man. And so with this false kind of pseudo-mythology surrounding this challenge now, I felt that I had no choice but to undertake it and to complete it successfully with no help from anyone else and under the complete, singular power of my own body. And so I arranged the bike and everything as well as I could to make it as comfortable as I could to bring it back to Atlanta on my shoulder. And did all this too, mind you, with a backpack full of food and clothes, my iPad, books, everything that I needed to spend the night at my house in Lilburn, I had brought back with me on my bike. And so I was carrying probably, 10 pounds maybe on my bike, on my back, and then the bike on my shoulder. And I took pictures of everything, had my sister Lauren take pictures of me. And so this is very well documented, and I set out to do it. And it was very, 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 very difficult, but it was one of the best bike rides I have ever had in my life. It was so hard and so draining and so focused, and that focus is really what I loved the most about it. Just the sheer difficulty and the unknowability about how each next curve would treat me. I had to go up Stone Mountain with this bike on my shoulder. I had to go up the hills on McClendon with this bike on my shoulder. Had to get 26 miles from door to door, from Lilburn to Grant Park, where Josh lives, with this bike on my shoulder. And I had a few near falls where the front wheel hit my handlebars of my bike, my geared bike, my Scatante, and kind of made me swerve a little bit, which was scary, and I definitely had a lot of choice words, but I just had a very solid mantra of saying, fuck this hill, whenever I'd have to go up a hill, and just insulting the hill. And I didn't have to get off my bike once to go up any hill. And it really felt like it opened up a new level of biking for me, because I was able to do all those things with so much added weight and this weird, cumbersome, unbalanced burden on my shoulder. It just felt monumental. And it turned out, after talking to Josh once I actually delivered the bike, that was just the preliminary round of becoming the man. That was like the Olympic trials of becoming the man. That was a test to show that I could handle the tests. And so that's like lowercase I, it's a minor point of a larger series of events that will have to take place in order to become the man. And so I'm happy that I passed the test. I don't feel tricked or misled in the fact that it was only preliminary and I didn't know that at the time. But it is a major victory in my life, and I'm very happy that I undertook it as a challenge and that I succeeded. And I look forward to the next group and set of challenges that lay before me now. And as they arise, whenever they may, wherever they may, I intend to rise to meet them as well on level ground and to decimate them, to just one by one put them to shame and make them seem easy. Because it turned out, in truth, that the bringing of the bike from Lilburn to Atlanta was in fact itself just too easy. I didn't even break skin. There was no blood. I have no bruise. There's no real markings or anything. I felt the toll that it had, had on my body the next day. I had a slight soreness in my back from carrying all that weight, but I didn't feel diminished at all. My strength overall was still very, very good, and it was just an excellent day, a very, very good day. And I went to work after I got back and worked 8-hour shift. No, it was a 7-hour shift, 3:30 to 10:30. After having done that, and it was Sunday, and it was the busiest Sunday we've had in, I don't know, since I've been there. It was non-stop customers, and just with everything I had left, I put everything into my job that day, and I sent all the baggers away whenever they would come. I wanted to go as fast as I could, as efficiently as I could, and pack up all the groceries as I scanned them and just talk with the customers and have just like this perfect interaction while still doing my job to the best of my ability. And that was a huge victory. That was a great day, and I'm glad that I was lucky enough to have it. The next order of business, I guess I'll talk about the other bike-related thing, and then we'll talk about my tickets, and then I will head back towards, I guess, home. It's kind of a low-mileage day, but again, it's getting kind of late, and I want to get home and do a little marking on my map of Atlanta. Don't need to stay out too late tonight. So, I've been going around Atlanta a lot recently, and trying to just explore new areas that I've never been to, and just see what other kinds of topography Atlanta has to offer. Because, I've been a million places in Atlanta, but most of the places I've been to a million times. And so there's sort of sort of a jadedness to the roads that I've come to know all too well, like DeKalb Avenue, Ponce, Moreland, Edgewood, Peachtree. What else? Man, there's so many. Boulevard, Glenwood, Spring Street, West Peachtree. What else? The list could go on. Howell Mill, Marietta Street. I'm gonna take a sip of water. Anyway, the point is, when I was in Japan, I realized that even an area that you've become jaded towards can still hold secrets if you're willing to go off the trodden path. And I realized that in Japan when I went to the west side, the west coast of Japan, the Osaka, Kyoto, Nara region, and got to see a whole other side of Japan, which continued too when I went to go to Fuji with Quick and Alex and Maxime. And I just realized, there's such a big world out there. And the reason why you get so bored and so almost depressed with your situation is just because it's like you've walked the same path so many times that you've started to, make a tunnel, or you've started to make, a trench. You've walked so many times on this same road that you have physically eroded the area, and you have made it to where it dips down, metaphorically speaking, And so, thus too does your focus. It becomes dull. Your motivation becomes less. And I would still walk when I was in Japan, regardless of the fact that I felt that I was kind of bored with the surroundings that I had, because I just didn't want to not walk. I wanted to do something physical, even if I had to do the same thing that I had done the day previous. And that's just sort of a theme in my life. But I know a lot of people who just, they sit on the couch for hours and just don't do anything, and then they complain about being bored, which is a situation and circumstance that I haven't felt or had since being a child. And I remember being bored years and years ago and complaining to my mom about being bored, and just how weird it is just to be bored when there's so many options. And so that's what I'm doing right now. I'm exploring the options that are available, because Atlanta is a huge city, and it's got a lot of history, and it's got a lot of diversity, and there's a lot to see, from all the parks, the cemeteries, the jails, the historical buildings. There's just a lot you can pay attention to, and there's a lot to explore if you're just willing to kind of put out your tentacles and your feelers and just look around. And so this is one ride now that I'm on where I've been doing nothing but new roads. I'm on Cascade, like I said before, which is, I guess, an offshoot of, or what Ralph David Abernathy turns into Cascade. And I'm about to ride probably back up Cascade towards Murphy Street, which is a road that goes parallel to Peachtree. And it's this weird road that feels like early 1900s. There's this like kind of crazy bridge where all these homeless people live, and there's goats over there, and there used to be horses, all these old burnt down buildings with like broken glass everywhere and stuff. And that'll be my next little trip, back up all the hills that I've already come down. I'm listening to Lil Wayne. I've realized while biking, especially trips like this, it's cool to listen to a single artist, especially one that I'm really pumped up by, like Lil Wayne, and just listen to whatever discography I have, whatever amount of albums I have of that artist on shuffle. Because I'm familiar with all the songs, but if they're coming in a different order, then that's cool. And if they're songs that can pump me up, then, I can sustain a more intense cadence and level of bike riding for longer. And so, that's what I'm doing now, and I'll go back home soon so that I can write on my map, which is what I was going to do yesterday, until what I will talk about last is discussed. And so that brings us now finally to the last point of business. The 2 citations that I was issued yesterday, the 16th of April, which I guess, yes, it was my day off. Man, it was so lame. It's not even something necessarily to be proud of, because it was completely absent of any element that could be described as badass. I was at an intersection. I was at the intersection of Boulevard and I-20, and I ran a traffic light, which I tend to always do, and I weaved in and out of traffic, which I tend to always do. And I heard the siren behind me once I'd done these things, and I was just hoping to God that it wasn't for me, because I've heard that siren before from behind when I've done something illegal, and a lot of the times it's just a policeman turning on his lights so that he can speed past traffic and then take a turn and slow down so they just don't have to wait through all the lights. But this time, as a few times as it has been in the past, the lights, the flashings, the sounds, the siren, it was for me. And so I was pulled over on my bike, hoping to God that this would just be one of those instances where I got warnings and everything. And the policeman asked me for my license, and I so badly wanted to be a smartass, and so badly wanted to just tell this guy to fuck off, just because he's being such a fucking prick. So bored he must have been to waste his time talking to me about this, To me, it seems only fair, if I'm going to break the law, that, I'm putting my life on the line, so I have a pretty good wager that will punish me if I've made the wrong decision, So you add insult to injury when you make me penalized by some sort of a financial penalty. Which is bullshit, but, I held my tongue, I was respectful, and I ended up thanking him at the end. But when he pulled me over, he asked me to see identification, and I was like, student ID, okay? And he was like, no, government-issued license. And, I know for a fact that you don't need a license to drive, to operate, to ride a bicycle on the road. And so I was a little skeptical of this, but I didn't have the heart yet to argue, because if I could still get out of these tickets, I would really be wanting to strive for that, rather than some sort of instantly gratifying, smart aleck kind of remark and, interaction. But the guy stayed in his car the whole time, which was very unfortunate, because I wasn't able to talk to him while he wrote everything out. And he had my driver's license, and then he came out of the car after filling out 2 tickets, which took an eternity to fill out. And that's been my experience in the past. I've been pulled over in like Oklahoma or something when I was with Brittany going cross country, and got a ticket for that. These tickets just take forever. And so he came out of the car, and I read over the ticket, trying to take a long time because, he had inconvenienced me by this, and I wasn't about to sign some stupid bullshit if I didn't know exactly what it said. So I read over it, and I asked him why he needed my license and if the tickets were charged to my license. And I was like, remember too, this is me trying to be a borderline between respect and disrespect, and just treading it with, a ballerina's precision, just on my tippy toes. I was asking him if it would charge to my driver's license, and he said yes, and I said why that would be applicable if the offenses that I was being charged for were being put onto a license that was intended for me it was intended for me to use when I am operating a motor vehicle. But if I'm on a bicycle and I don't need a license, how can you, apply these tickets to that? Like how, there's some sort of loophole here that I don't understand, how you can jump from, well, I don't even know if it's worth trying to extrapolate, but basically it just didn't seem fair that he could identify me as a person, use my information, given my driver's license, and then charge me for riding a different vehicle. To me, it felt like, man, what's a metaphor that makes sense? It's like, man, it doesn't really matter, I guess. Anyway, I just didn't feel like it was fair, but I didn't want to argue, because he could have given me 3 tickets because I ran 2 lights, and I guess he could have specified each light as another ticket or something. But regardless, I realized that this was not the right fight to pick, and I took the tickets in humility, thanked him, and then rode home. And after starting on my way home, which, by the way, I had a bicycle pump with me on like the front of my handlebars that I had been using to put the finishing touches on Josh's bike. So I was somewhat handicapped. I just started thinking about my defense, because, the first thing I thought once this happened was that I was not going to pay however much retarded bullshit money I was going to be charged for doing what I had done, because I just didn't feel there's no consistency. If it was consistent that people were, law abiding, then I would feel like there was some justice in him doing what he did to ticket me. But it's just not fair to me. It doesn't. There's no. If laws aren't enforced consistently, then it just seems like they're done capriciously. And if laws are enacted capriciously, that makes it seem like it's some sort of a weird despotism, and it's just like people being whimsical about important things based on how they feel in the moment. Which, had the man given me 3 tickets, I know that my parting words with him would have been, slow day, huh? Just very smart alecky, like, oh wow, you must be so fucking bored and so understimulated right now that you thought that it would be fun to pick on me for some reason. Anyway, so on my way home, I was formulating what would become my defense in this situation, what I could possibly say to defend what I had done in a reasonable way that could actually be used to have the tickets thrown out, reduced, or perhaps cut in half. And so I wrote my defense as soon as I got home, because it was freshest in my mind, and I just knew I had formulated something. I realized there was a snap, and I realized what I could say in order to justify what I had done. And so I wrote out this 1.5 pages of my, I guess, defense for what I had done, and my rationale for why I should not be penalized as charged. And I'm going to include it in this podcast. It's like a 5-minute little reading that I did, and I read it while I was listening to Mozart's Requiem. Recordare was the song I was listening to, and it was just very intense, and I felt like I was on This American Life or something, reading for a segment. It was an ambulance. I realized that the difference between ambulances, sirens, and police car sirens is that ambulance and fire trucks have a longer pull for each tone that they send out. You can hear it now. It's a very long sonic oscillation that goes on. It's like, whereas the policeman, their siren is much more acute. It's like, or something, very much, the frequency is higher for the waves and everything. And so anyway, which is an important distinction, because oftentimes I'll hear an ambulance and be worried that I have just been caught doing something illegal by a policeman. And there have actually been 3 policemen to go by as I've been sitting here talking in the recorder. They're going by on the road behind me, which makes me wonder if this is some sort of a forlorn area, or if this is some sort of area where there is like a police headquarters or something. But one of the officers actually just stopped, and so I wouldn't be surprised if this dumbass bitch comes over here and gives me some shit for sitting on the steps of a park that's closed because the sun is down. But I'll cross that bridge when it comes, and be respectful when I do it. And then I'll talk about it later, and that's when I'll really get out my emotions, the cathartic rhythms that were actually pulsing through my body when this stupid rat bastard chucked out his word vomit at me. But he's stopped still. He doesn't seem to be approaching, so I'll save that venom for another time. April 16th, 2012. Citation 4347086. Manner of writing. And 4347087. Traffic light. 6:42 p.m. I was issued 2 traffic tickets for infractions that occurred while riding my bicycle. I believe that these 2 charges should be reduced to warnings because of the specific nature of the area I was in and the quality of the Atlanta roads for bicyclists, which I would argue led to the legal infractions themselves. I was biking back towards my apartment from Grant Park and was at the intersection of Boulevard and I-20. There are 2 traffic lights that separate the area before Boulevard from I-20. The reason for my action that resulted in the citation regarding the manner of riding, 4347086, was that I wanted to get in front of the traffic because there are no devoted bike lanes in this area of the city, and people will oftentimes enter the on-ramp without using their directional indicators, which is a danger to me because these motorists may not be anticipating having a cyclist to their right, and so when turning right, they may turn into me, causing injury, vehicular damage, or at worst, death. If I may depart briefly for the sake of a personal anecdote, which is the reason why this is an important consideration for me, and a reason that justifies the specific instance of lawbreaking. I once worked at Verasano's Pizzeria on Peachtree, and would commute there by bicycle. One day, while on my way to work, there was a woman who turned right into a Chick-fil-A off of Peachtree without using her turn signal while I was biking on the small shoulder next to her. She did not see me and so effectively shunted me off of the road, funneling me like a sharply angled ramp off of the street. I wasn't hurt, nor was her car damaged, but it was a minor accident nonetheless, and so I have always since been keenly aware of the possibility that a car turning right may not be aware of my position on the road well enough or at all. The cars entering I-20 from Boulevard travel at much faster speeds than people on Peachtree Street, and oftentimes do not indicate that they will be getting on the highway when they turn right, because when the light is green at this intersection, there are no other cars that can enter the highway at the same time. And so this is the justification for citation 4347086, which was the manner of travel citation that was issued. I traveled to the front of the line of cars so that they would be visually aware that I was there. There is some fuzziness to me about whether or not this citation in particular is fully justified in light of the Georgia bicycle law that specifies when overtaking and passing on the right is permitted. It reads that a cyclist traveling in a bicycle lane or in a lane wide enough for motor vehicles and bicycles to share may pass motor vehicles on the right, but still must take care to avoid turning vehicles. Because I was trying to get in front of the line of traffic so that my presence could be known, I passed with cars on my left and right, through the middle, because there is not enough room on the shoulder of the road to pass these cars safely. The second citation issued for running the traffic light, 4347087, I feel was also unjustly issued because of the nature of Atlanta's streets for cyclists, and of the motorists who occupy these streets. There is no denying that I went through the intersection of Boulevard and I-20 while the light was red. However, it was not done without conscious awareness of the timing in which I entered the intersection. The opposing light at the intersection being discussed was yellow as I entered it, and there was no oncoming traffic. And again, this was done so that I could have my presence known to the drivers around me, and so that I could pass the on-ramp leading to I-20 safely before the other vehicles, without the threat of being turned into by one of the motorists entering the on-ramp. The time of day that this incident took place also has a strong bearing on my decision to enter the intersection when I did. It was around 6:30 p.m. when the incident took place, 6:42 when the citation was issued, and so the likelihood that the motorists surrounding me at that time of day, rush hour, would be wanting to merge onto I-20 was high, and so in order to ensure my own safety, I decided to enter the intersection. Ultimately, I made both decisions, one, to enter the intersection when the light was red, and two, to pass traffic on the left and right because the streets in Atlanta are not widely geared towards cyclists. Ironically, in this particular situation, I believe my actions went towards ensuring a greater practice of safety, given the state of the streets and the motorists that travel upon them in Atlanta. This incident may have been altogether avoided if Atlanta had a complete system of bike lanes traversing the city, but as such is not the case for now. I will concede that this is an issue for another day. Thank you. And so that concludes, for the moment, everything that I can think of that is worth... Oh, shit, that's not true. I just remembered a hugely important thing. Oh my god, this is like competitive with what's been happening with my grandma, because it's just such a big development in my life, because it has to do with my friend Josh. Oh my god, how could I forget? Good lord, this is the event of 2012 or something. When I came back from Japan, I reconnected with Josh, pretty quickly. We talked a few times on Facebook, and I had sent oodles and boodles and croodles of postcards to his house and all the guys he lives with. And he and I made plans pretty quickly that we should really go up to the mountains and just spend some time with each other hiking. And my parents have a cabin up there. And I was going to actually interview him, but I lost my recorder the week before, so that didn't happen. But he and I ended up making plans, asking off for work, and arranging everything so that we could have this time together up in the mountains. Here comes the policeman. Will I get shit talked? We'll see. Looks like no. His acceleration hasn't stopped. Excellent. I'm home free. Anyway, so everything was arranged so that we could head out Sunday night, drive up to the mountains late, get there, go to sleep, wake up the next day early around 7:30, and just head out to hike. And I had made a list of things to do while we were there, the trails that we've done together in the past that were kind of nostalgic, and a few that I've never done before, but had heard about or read about, or so on and so forth. And so we spent Sunday driving up and just talking and everything, and he had brought his dog, which was a secret because my dad would flip if he knew that we had brought a dog, but it stayed outside, so his flip would be only 1/4 justified. Anyway, we got to just kind of really have some time for each other, and Josh had decided that he was going to stop smoking cigarettes during this time, and he has since still stopped smoking, and I really attribute a lot of that willpower and strength that he's derived to really be able to do that to the time that we spent together in the mountains, because it was just so restorative. I could tell that he was so, I felt like he had years of just these feelings, these thoughts that were just tangled up inside of him and just bunched and really dense and, crisscrossed, all, messy, tangled. And I felt really good the entire time. I've never felt freer in my life. I feel like I have a lot of direction, a lot of potential, a lot of possibility right now. And I feel like it's growing every day. I feel like I'm in a really good spot in my life. And Josh, I could tell his vibe was more unhealthy than that. And so